ascertain that we need NGCDF, because kids are at home right now because the bursaries are not there. And if the bursaries don't come, and if we are not, when we talk about free primary or free secondary education, Mr. Speaker, there is nothing like free. Just yesterday I got a call from one of the parents telling us we are asked for this money for one thing or the other. Mr. Speaker, the other thing is about debt. Mr. Speaker, we need to reduce our debt. And I agree with the President that we need to reduce the 300 billion. But Mr. Speaker, the 300 billion should not be removed from the development budget. It should be removed from the recurrent expenditure, not from the development budget, because we all need roads, we all need a lot of things in our constituencies, and we need that money for CDF. So they should not even think, when they are going to bring a supplementary budget, to remove the 45 billion of CDF, because that supplementary will not pass in this House. I believe that is the feeling of this House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and want to congratulate you again. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Kilgoris.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much, and I also wish to begin by giving thanks to the people of Kilgoris for electing me to Parliament. It has been noted that this has been a long hiatus away from this House, but Mr. Speaker, I have also spent useful time serving as Kenya's ambassador to China, and though that was a very useful moment. And I want to congratulate you, Kenya's ambassador to China, for your election. And though that was a very useful I know you are quite capable. And I want to congratulate Kenya's ambassador. Sometimes I enjoy some of your good humor. And though that was a very useful. I know you are quite capable. And I want to congratulate Kenya's ambassador. Sometimes I enjoy some of your good humor. And though that was a very useful. I know you are quite capable. And I want to congratulate Mr. Speaker. Sometimes I enjoy some of your good humor. Though that was a very useful. I know you are quite capable. And I want to congratulate Mr. Speaker. Sometimes I enjoy Kenya. Sometimes Kenya is the most that I know you are right. And I want to congratulate and you know, Kenya. Sometimes Kenya is the most. We attended a very and I want ceremony at Kasarani. The ceremony was the inauguration of the Jubilee President and Deputy President, very well conducted by the now Deputy Speaker. And I was sitting next to some prominent Kenyans, and they watched, and we watched the way Kenyans were watching the presentation of the agenda of government at that time. And I asked my senior colleague of mine who was sitting next to me, what do you think about what do you think about the new government? What do you think about the president and the deputy president? And that senior colleague, who is now deceased, unfortunately, said to me, I think these two people will perform very well. And he was very optimistic that Kenya was going to go places. And they actually digitally showed us the Kenya of their dreams. And we were all very hopeful, and we went back home. Some of us went back to our legal practice and waited for the great moments to happen. 10 years later, Mr. Speaker, the successor of President Kenyatta had this to say. He says, I have news, and it is not very good news. Our financial situation is not very good. Mr. Speaker, the President of Kenya has said that the financial situation is not good. The economy is bad. In fact, the Deputy President has used much clearer words and said the economy is very bad. Mr. Speaker, of course, there are questions that would be asked, that we would like to ask, as to how we arrived at this situation. From a situation of optimism to a situation where we have now declared our economy to be very bad. we would have loved to do some postmortem on what actually were the causes of this situation. But I don't know whether that would help much. The situation as we find it now requires our attention. And this parliament should consider itself not as a war government or as a constitutional government or parliament, but in fact as a parliament that must sort out the economy. And more than anything else, the thing that will pain us, the things that we must set us to scratch our heads is how to bring back the economy to shape, because we aren't doing any good. The many things that we promised our people on the campaign trail depend on the economy. And unless we sort out the economy, there is very little else we are going to do. So we now wait for the government to present to us their economic policies to see what can be done differently. Because what I know, Mr. Speaker, is that most of the people who are in the Jubilee government are also in this government. The only consolation we have is that I hear that the president is very well advised by economists. I hope these economists will now crack this nut and tell us what ought to be done so that we can come out of this conundrum. Mr. Speaker, the economy is what has caused a lot of unemployment. And of all the problems honorable members will face in their constituencies, I think we will be able to tackle many. But I think the one that will give us a lot of disappointment, if we don't sort out the economic problems we have, I tell you, many of us will not be re-elected because the young people do not want to hear about it. They want jobs, and they don't want you to go back and tell them that we went and faced I think sharks on the Jordan, because they do not know in the first place that there was a Jordan to cross. So we have to sort out the economic issues today and not tomorrow. Mr. Speaker, I noticed that the president has laid strong emphasis on agriculture. And coming from an area of where agriculture is the main activity, must say that the president's efforts should be supported. But Mr. Speaker, the problems are because of production. Production in agriculture is a very expensive thing in Kenya. Not just the fertilizer, but beginning from the tractors that you hire, the fuel that you put into it, and therefore the fertilizer. However, it is a good step that we have addressing the issue of fertilizer. Unfortunately, if you get farmers to go to the NCPB to buy fertilizer and say that they must be registered farmers, that is not good, because that is creating red tape. In fact, that will encourage corruption. Put this fertilizer on the shops, in the shops, so that people can buy them from there without having to go to get a signature from the DO or from the chief. They need to buy to access their their fertilizer from the shops. Mr. Speaker, the house that believes in devolution, giving health to people down there, Kenyans. And I think it is time for this house to reconsider and to whether this issue, health, shouldn't be brought back a little bit to where the experts are more, because not every governor is ready to see health the way the rest of the country would like to see it. I believe myself, our doctors, to be controlled centrally, to be posted centrally, so that we can be able to develop the facilities well. And Mr. Speaker, I think at some point the government decided to hire machinery, which they would have bought at the same price. We should now target the acquisition of X-ray machines, of MRI machines, of cancer machines, and place these within the hospitals in our localities. Mr. Speaker, I wish therefore to register my thanks to this speech.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for congratulate you, Honorable Speaker. Moses. and also Honorable Paul Cholet for being elected as the Deputy Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I want to thank the great people of Endebess for having seen it fit to elect me as their Member of Parliament for the third time consecutively. I want to assure them that I'll continue delivering the services as I've done before and make sure that there is great development within that area. Honorable Speaker, when you read our Constitution in Article 1, it says that all sovereign power belongs to the people of Kenya and shall be exercised only in accordance with this Constitution. The people may exercise their sovereign power either directly or through this democratically elected representatives. On 29th, Honorable Speaker, I was glad that when the President came to this House, we had all the three arms of government, because the Constitution recognizes in the same Article 1 that the sovereign power under the Constitution is delegated to the state organs, and that is Parliament, the judiciary, and the executive. And when the three arms of government were able to be in this House during the President's speech, it brought us as a country together, and that was very important, Honorable Speaker. I listened, and I've read again the President's speech. When my senior colleague in the profession, but also the same, we are in the same category as members of Parliament, Honorable Nyikal, referred to Article 10 as being divisive in the President's speech, I had to reread it again. The fact that the election was so close is an indication that what unites us is always much more greater than what divides us. With the support of Kenyans, we've lodged ethnicity as the central organizing principle of our politics, thereby retiring it for good, the ethnic mobilization and personality cults, together with their culture and practices of exclusion, discrimination, patronage, tribalism, and nepotism. Many of the young Kenyans in the street, Honorable Speaker, they don't look at themselves as Kikuyu, Sabot, Luhya, or anything. They look themselves as Kenyans. This issue of people talking of maybe the Kalenjin nation, the Kikuyu nation, it is we politicians who are polluting the Kenyans. But when you sit down with your child to speak at home, they never think of themselves as any other person. They think themselves as Kenyans. And it is upon us to cultivate that culture among our people. In the President's speech, Honorable Speaker, the President talks of his administration allocating 50 billion every year to the Hustlers Fund, from which micro, small, and medium enterprises can access affordable credit to start and expand their businesses. Many Kenyans outside there are looking forward to this Hustler Fund, and they are looking into this House to see what legislation we can be able to provide, because as far as the President is concerned, he laid down his policy. He didn't have to give the details. It is upon us, because I've heard some people talk about why we've seen the President's speeches being very short. It lacks the details. It is the details that it is upon this House to come up with. How do we operationalize the Hustler Fund? The President has said we can be able to allocate that 50 billion every year to make sure that Kenyans are able to access affordable credit. They are able to access the Hustler Fund and do businesses. The mamambogas, the border, and everybody who is outside there, your constituents. So this calls for the unity of this House to come up with legislation and regulations in which to be able to operationalize this Hustlers Fund. The President went further and said there is tremendous opportunity for the House to fully take up its role in resolving the systematic issues that limit access to affordable homes and affordable finances. And we've seen the President the other day going to Mukuru Kwanjenga and launching the housing project. We've seen him going to other areas and talking about the same housing projects. My friends, Honorable Kaluma and others from Homa Bay, you missed an opportunity because I think your people, I don't know whether in Homa Bay town, people must be, I don't know whether they have enough affordable houses. Your governor was away, Honorable Kaluma was away, and you tweeted to say that you needed to have been informed. But it was in common knowledge that the president was going there for church service. But it was also, it was upon you to make sure that you welcome the president and raise the issues concerning your people, especially in housing matters. In the president's speech on matters health, which I'm passionate about, considering my background as a medical doctor and a consultant surgeon for that matter, the president talks about universal health care. And he goes further to say that we must be able to look at it right from the area of preventive, promotive, and looking at chronic illnesses. We are in a society where many of the lifestyle illnesses, hypertension, diabetes, obesity, and other illnesses are setting in because of our lifestyle, our lifestyle nature. We should be able to look at issues of universal health coverage, right from the promotive, preventive, and chronic illnesses. We should also be able to make it affordable for every Kenyan, that every Kenyan can access insurance cover, because many of you, you've heard that we are moving ATMs. Many of you, when you go home, our constituents will come and say, I need a Harambe because I have a huge hospital bill for my father, for my brother, for my sister. And it's not possible for all of us to be able to be raising that money for Harambe every now and then. But if these people are provided with universal health care, where you walk into the hospital, you are treated, you get medication. If it is an operation, you're operated. If it's a question of asking for any other investigation to be done, it is able to be done. You are given medication, and you walk out of the hospital. Then it will make life much easier for all of us. And lastly, among other things, is the issue of fertilizer subsidy. This, our farmers will welcome it, and we would want the National Cereals and Produce Board to have a better way of making sure that this fertilizer reaches to the farmers in a more accessible, efficient manner, so that we can be able to increase our production. With those few remarks, Honorable Speaker, I want to record the thanks to the President's speech. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Bonchari.
Thank you, Speaker, for the opportunity. I take this opportunity to thank you and to congratulate you being elected as Speaker of the National Assembly, and Deputy Speaker Gladys Bowes, who was my teacher at Parklands Law School. I also take the opportunity to thank the people of Bonchari for having confidence in me and electing me as Member of Parliament. I will be representing you in this august House through motions, a debate, statements, questions, legislation, as a way of representing you and your interests, as we talked, as you advised me during the campaigns. I've taken time to look and listen to the speech by the President in the 13th Parliament, and like it has been noted, that it lacks in detail, but I hope in due course there will be policies to support it, his intentions and wishes for it to be actualized. I note that it talks about cutting recurrent expenditure on paragraphs 40, 41, 42 of the speech. It talks about enhancing savings so that we have money for our investments. It talks about controlling the public debt, which has grown so astronomically. He also talks about the poor culture of savings, which undermines investments in this country. It talks about affordable housing. Now, with regard to savings and investments in this country, often we forget to take note that investments are both local and international and foreign. And when you look at what makes Kenya attractive or not attractive as an investment destination, there are a number of things that we need to learn and take care of. The cost of doing business in this country is quite high. You talk to any investor, foreign or local, the cost is pretty high, which needs to be looked at and be controlled through this 13th Parliament. In addition to that, there are inefficiencies, there is corruption, there are a lot of gatekeepers. When looking for simple things like approvals and licenses, it takes up to 5 years to start a business in this country. I'm writing a book with some people about doing business in Kenya, and when you do research, one of the things that stands out, Kenya compared to other countries in the region, is that we are not very attractive because of the reasons I just said. Now, in most cases, when we talk about affordable housing, we tend to focus on urban areas. But the reality is, for those of us who come from rural areas or constituencies, housing is a big problem. A lot of people don't have decent housing. I hope and pray that we are going to look at this so that we have decent housing for our folks in the rural constituencies like Bonchari. What we learn around and what we hear around is that our foreign reserves are dwindling. The cost of living is skyrocketing. And as we talk about trying to move towards the free market, but let's take cognizance of the fact that we need to take care of our indigent and the poor members of society so that they are not disadvantaged, even as we want to move towards the free market economy. Even the most developed economies have initiatives or programs that provide nets for the poor and for the elderly people who otherwise are disadvantaged. The youth unemployment, particularly in Bonchari, stands at about 60%. We need to have a conversation now. We need to deal with the youth unemployment. It's a time bomb that needs to be addressed now, and I hope that there's going to be legislation in this House that is going to address this problem, which I believe is not unique to Bonchari, but elsewhere in the country. Our youth, our future, they have talents, they have the skills, they just want opportunities. The poverty index in Bonchari is one of the highest in the country, around 44%. And I hope that I'll be bringing statements or legislation or bills that are going to help alleviate this problem in Bonchari. The Bonchari people are very hardworking, they are good farmers, they just want opportunities, they want to be lifted, they want a little support so that they can fend for themselves. One thing about this country, particularly those of us who come from agricultural areas, so that they can fend for themselves. The prices of our commodities are very poor. One thing about this country, particularly those of us who come from agricultural areas, so that they can fend for themselves, we need to take care of so that the value chains. One thing about this country, particularly farmers get a decent pay for their sweat, and they can be encouraged to contribute to supporting the economy and making this economy grow. After all, agriculture is the mainstay of this economy. Education standards in the Bonchari are not very pleasing. The infrastructure is very poor. Even when we heard about the allocations from the Ministry of Education, we didn't get as much. I'm hoping that in the current budget, and maybe budgets to come, we're going to have budgets that are going to support the infrastructure of our schools so that we can have the infrastructure and the environment that is friendly and is enabling for our students to learn and get the education and the skills they need to be useful members of society. Bonchari Pro is one of the few constituents that doesn't have a TVET. I hope in the next 1 year or 2 years, we're going to have a TVET built in Bonchari so that for the many young people who want to acquire skills in plumbing, in masonry, and so on, can get a place where they can acquire these skills. The infrastructure in Bonchari is very poor. Our roads, energy, we need a lot of energy. Going to be pushing, and I hope that I get the support of this parliament so that we can have the roads we need and enable our farmers to take their produce to the markets. Our social protection in this country is something far from celebrating. Those of us who have taken these positions every day, you're going to get phone calls, you're going to get people coming and asking for help just because they are not able to afford the basic commodities and services that they need for their livelihood. We need social protection. We need the money that is allocated for the elderly people to reach them in good time. We need the record to be updated so that those who have fallen in that age group are taken care of and are supported so that they can be able to buy food, they can be able to buy their clothing, they can be able to buy their medication. I'm big for universal health care. This is something that we've talked about for a long time in this country, but it looks so elusive to be accomplished. I pray that this time it's going to be accomplished. You can be able to do it, because one of the things you're going to be receiving that from all our people is about medical bills. The cost of healthcare in this country is very high, and I hope that we can be able to find a solution to that. You go to any hospital, you go to any physician, when you come out, it's very high, and it's even worse for the ordinary people in the villages. I recognize that's the function of the county governments, but I think we can support we can bring ideas, we can bring motions that are going to make our healthcare affordable and accessible to the people. Otherwise, we'll be attending burials every other time. Like in my constituency, there are so many. We can't afford to have that. It's unfortunate and it's something regrettable that in this century, in this era, a number of people in Bonchari don't have title deeds to their land, particularly the people of Simwaga, in Bonyando, in Ogiakumu ward, they don't have title deeds for their land. I hope that the government can look into this and make it possible for them to acquire title deeds for their land. The people of Ogiakumu, the people of Wamurenda, the people of Riana, the people of Mariba, I thank you very much, and I am here to work for you. I'll be advancing your cause. I'll be pushing your interest in this parliament, and I hope that we develop our constituency together. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable Member for Gatanga, Honorable Edward Wakili.
Madam Deputy Speaker, let me start by congratulating the President of the Republic of Kenya, Dr. William Samoei Ruto, and his Deputy Rigathi Gachagua for being elected as the 5th President of the Republic of Kenya, and also take this opportunity to congratulate Moses Wetangula as the Speaker of this House. And also, Madam Deputy Speaker, I congratulate you, my able classmate, Gladys Sholay, or also your election as a member, as a deputy speaker of this parliament. Madam Speaker, allow me first of all to thank the great people of Gatanga for giving me an opportunity to serve them as their member of parliament for the next 5 years. That's a great honor and dignity. With all my might, knowledge and wisdom, God before me. Madam Speaker, sir, Madam Speaker, I want just to make a few remarks on the presidential speech, which, in my opinion, resonates very well with the great people of Gatanga. The great people of Gatanga are farmers and traders. And in the presidential speech, the president has addressed the issues of farming and has addressed the issues of trade. Madam Speaker, the president has elucidated on the need of the government to provide cheap fertilizer. The reason why in the process of farming, from the seedlings to fertilizer, cost of input, and that's why issue of consumption. And I'll happen and pray that as we go further, other than getting what we call cheap fertilizer, we expect to get subsidies in terms of cheap seeds, cheap inputs and implements, even reducing the cost of power, especially for farmers who pump water to do irrigation. Madam Speaker, I also want to address the issue about agro-processing, which is also connected with farming. Gatanga sadly has almost 60% of our youth unemployed. And we do believe that the moment we embrace agro-processing in agriculture, the way we have done in tea, we do it in avocados, we do it in macadamia, we also do it in tea. I do believe and trust that our youth can be able to get employment, and we're able to absorb all of them and be able to make sure that we are able to expand the net of the people who are contributing to the taxes of this country. And to that end, Madam Speaker, it is my agenda that to do meaningful farming, we also need to embrace what we call modern day technology. And one of the things to do is to ensure that we are able to avoid relying on what we call the natural rain and embrace irrigation. Madam Speaker, sir, Madam Speaker, I'll bring in a bill shortly to address the issue of water in Gatanga. It's sad to mention this, that the Kaine Dam, which has been supplying the whole of Nairobi with water, all that water is carted away and not a single drop of that water is consumed by the people of Gatanga, either domestically or even in terms of irrigation. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'll bring us a bill shortly before this House to be able to address the issue of irrigation, whereby that water, so that this can have what we call equitable distribution of that water in such a way that the people of Gatanga, where that dam is situated, that water is used for irrigation, and people are able also to consume that water as well as we serve the people of Nairobi. Madam Speaker, I also want to bring up the issue about the universal health. One of the biggest challenges in where we come from in Gatanga, and I've seen honorable members elucidating to it, it touches in almost every corner of this country, is the challenge of health. The members of parliament are carrying huge loads. Every day we are getting messages, we are putting in WhatsApp groups, whereby each and every day we are contributing money toward medical support of our people. And the president elucidated that he's going to make sure that we are able to embrace universal health in such a way that our people will get the NHIF card, and the burden which they have, which you are busy supporting them, is offloaded from our shoulders, and they can be used that money doing other things. And therefore, I pray the members of parliament, when the legislation is brought before this house, to revamp, restructure NHIF in such a way that it can be responsive to our people's needs. Madam Speaker, I expect the members of parliament to be able to support it fully. Madam Speaker, I also want to support the presidential speech, especially when it comes to address the issue pertaining to Hustler Fund. That is the way to go, because as you find, our people, Kenyans do not want to be given a fish. Kenyans want to be given a hook to go and fish. And the moment we are able to put aside 50 billion each and every year to support the hustlers, the mamamboga, the mkokoteni, the kinyozi, what we are doing is to ensure we are empowering our people at the bottom to ensure that everybody puts a shilling in their own pocket and they can be able to contribute to this, to the economy. And to that end, Madam Speaker, I am planning to bring in a vendors people. There is recognizing the vendors in our fund. We need to come up with a legislation to protect and empower and recognize those hustlers. Madam Speaker, sir, I also want to support the issue of the CDF, which the President also supported in his speech. The CDF, as we have seen in almost every part of this country, has done marvelous. And I want to assure the people of Gatanga that the CDF Act 2015 is alive and kicking. We shall be able to support education. We shall be able to support the food program, and we shall be able to support all the infrastructure development which are pending to ensure there is proper services to our people. And finally, Madam Speaker, sir, Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to thank the President for nominating gallant soldiers in the CS position. I want to, first of all, make sure that I recognize the nomination of my mentor, Honorable Moses Kuria, Honorable Alice Wahome, Senator Kipchumba Murkomen, Kidiki Kithure, Jogona Ndongo, Rebecca Miano, and I wish and pray that this House will find favor and give them support and nominate them. Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Thank you so much.
Honorable Member for Mandera South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I will take this opportunity to, first of all, say thanks to my constituents for having elected me as their Member of Parliament. It was a tough election in my constituency and in many parts of northern Kenya, particularly because of the raging drought, and many pastoralists went through very difficult times choosing between tendering their animals and also participating in the democratic process of electing their leaders. And therefore, I thank them very much for having elected me as their member. I come from Mandera South constituency, which is a constituency in Mandera County, bordering a very difficult neighbor, Somalia on one side, and Ethiopia on the other side. Coming back to the President's speech, I would say that the President's speech, particularly between paragraph 5 and 7, encouraged a lot about the confidence that Kenyans have in Parliament and also the executive. The President's speech was very inspiring in the sense that he noted that a lot more members have been re-elected in Parliament and also a lot more members were re-elected in Senate. And he also mentioned about the broad-based support the government has got in 39 counties, having achieved 25% in the 35 counties. And the president reminded us, and maybe it is a challenge to us, that the confidence shown in us, both as parliament and executive, must be translated in terms of raising the bar to serve Kenyans, and also to ensure that there is accountability to the electorates who have elected us. As a member of Mandera South, I think my people that I represent in Parliament will definitely be happy to support the legislative agenda of His Excellency, the President, because the agenda actually is transformative on many issues that affect the people of my constituency. The President particularly talked about people living in, people living in the region where I come from, northeastern, particularly Mandera County, have historically felt left behind or marginalized. But the president's speech was very inspiring because he said his administration will be an open and transparent administration, and he assured us that his government will serve, quote, all people in all wards of each constituency and all constituencies in every region. That was very reassuring, and it is very hopeful for us, the constituents who live particularly in peripheral areas of this country like Mandera. The President's promise to seek additional resources to support the bottom-up scaling of justice, as well as his promise of allocating Kenya shillings 50 billion to the Hustlers Fund, is particularly inspiring because majority of the people I represent in Parliament happen to be at the bottom of the pyramid, and both initiatives, which is part of the President's legislative agenda, that is bottom-up scaling of justice, and the Hustlers Fund, the 50 billion Hustlers Fund for MSMEs, is a timely and most welcome idea. And I would say, Madam Speaker, that we need bottom-up scaling, not just in scaling of justice, but also scaling up of key government departments in some of these peripheral constituencies like where I come from. Like, for example, we need to have NHIF offices in that part of the world. We need to have, for example, birth and death registration departments in that part of the world, ID registration offices in that part of the world. So we need not just scale up justice at the top level, but we also need to scale up justice bottom up in some of those key departments that I've just mentioned. The plan of scaling up productivity in agriculture is also a very welcome idea, particularly from the region where I come from. And I would emphasize particularly that the need, the livestock part of the agriculture should be given equal prominence, just like the crop part of that agriculture. And I think when we talk of consumption and subsidies in favoring of supporting and investing in production, I think that initiative should go beyond fertilizer program and also improve livestock production as well. My take there is, just like we have seen the support to fertilizer, we need to see some kind of subsidy in terms of livestock production so that we can have livestock development and improvement in our production. And I am planning to bring on the floor of this House a bill on livestock insurance, basically to deal with the perennial drought problem, which wipes out animals, livestock that is the main economic lifestyle of our people in that region, so that if our livestock die, people can be able to insure them for compensation. Electricity, the President's speech talked about electricity as a major hindrance to development, and the idea of planning to facilitate the development of innovative and effective modalities to provide better off-grid system is very welcome. I come from a constituency where a large part of that constituency is not connected to electricity, and electricity goes along with, for example, connectivity of internet and telephone. When you don't have electricity, you may not have access to the internet. And given the importance of internet in this country now, for example, even for those who are in business, most of the procurement processes in the county and at the national level are done through online system. So if you are not connected to electricity and you are not connected to internet, it means some of Kenyans who are disadvantaged will not be able to access those opportunities. Even for students who join university, nowadays you have to do it through the COOPs, and it's an online thing. So if you are not connected to electricity, that's a major problem. The planned restructuring of NHIF to make it a better fit for purpose of social insurance is a good idea. Definitely is an idea which resonates very well with us, including the restructuring of the NHIF and NSSF. The most important point I would also like to mention here is the question of drought. And the President mentioned that the response to drought to 3.5 million Kenyans who are affected in 23 ASAL counties. The President talked of some solution in terms of mitigation, but I will say that plan should go beyond mitigation and look at the adoption measures and how to deal with loss and damage. For example, I come from this region where drought is a cyclic phenomena. And when we talk of cyclic, when you are in that part of the world, you are either struggling to get out of a drought situation, or you are preparing to get out of one, or you are preparing to get into one. And that is the cyclic nature of the drought in that part of the world. And drought has been a problem in that part of the world majorly because of the climate change, a climate which has been affected by pollution, pollution which has majorly been contributed to by major powers with big industries that contribute to the pollution of our environment. And I think we need as a country to look at how we approach this matter, especially with the COP, that is the Conference of Parties 27 coming up in Egypt very soon. We need to look at this question of climate change and pollution so that the principle of the biggest polluter pays can also be put on the table and we approach it as a country. Because this idea of giving our people relief every time there is drought, I think we can go beyond that relief and start asking the biggest polluters of our climate to start compensating our people, because the problems that we are suffering now in northeastern and many other parts of northern Kenya are a result of people who are polluting our environment millions of kilometers away. And therefore, I think that question of mitigation as well as... Time is over. All right. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honorable Member for Marsabit.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for allowing me to add my voice to this very important debate on the presidential speech. But before I get into that, Madam Speaker, I want to congratulate you and also our speaker. I also want to congratulate our president and the deputy president for running a very serious campaign and for winning the elections and for all that is in place now. I thank God for giving me the opportunity to be here in the 13th Parliament, as I thank the people of Marsabit for electing me and for giving me the opportunity to sit in Parliament, in 13th Parliament, on their behalf. Madam Speaker, the presidential speech was one of the best from my experience, and he spoke on the matters that affects every Kenyan, matters that has been affecting us. And for the last few years, Kenyans have faced challenges due to COVID-19, poor economy, the drought that is affecting and they needed to hear that message of hope from the president. And so the message came at the right time, whereby Kenyans were eagerly waiting, and he spoke to the issues that affect us, as I said. He was able to cover every part of the country in his speech. He also, in the brief speech, he was able to demonstrate high quality of leadership with good understanding and showing people that he's ready to keep the promises that he made during campaigns. Madam Speaker, the president spoke about the elected or re-elected members, together with women who have been elected, and also about the peaceful elections. That, to me, means a lot, because when members are re-elected, then it means that we are building our leaders, we are building confidence in their leadership, and that they'll be able to provide that quality leadership and also finish some of the projects, and there is continuity in the work that has been begun. When he touched on the women that have been elected and encouraged women in leadership, it gave me a lot of hope, putting into consideration the challenges that women go through as they go through elections, as they give themselves for leadership positions, the challenges they face from the people and from their counterparts. Madam Speaker, this shows that our president is ready to work with women to encourage women with dreams to be leaders, with dreams to be one day members of parliament in whatever capacity. I just want to encourage them, because it takes a lot of courage, it takes a lot of prayers, and it takes a lot of determination. You cannot just sit and say, yes, the government is for us as women. But I just want to encourage women like me to work hard, to fight for their space, and to be there so that they can be elected by their constituencies. Madam Speaker, again, the president touched on the peaceful election, and that gave me a lot of hope, because the issue of ethnicity that has always been there is no longer a problem to us. 2022, we went through a lot of dynamics. Kenyans united, Kenyans elected the leaders they wanted without putting into consideration clanism and ethnicity. This is something that has affected many parts of the country, and especially where I come from, though not in election time particularly, but it is something that has dragged Kenya in a big way. It has hindered development. It has stopped us from electing visionary and capable leaders. But this time round, Kenyans have demonstrated a different way of dealing with that, and it gives us hope that soon and very soon we will get out of this challenge. I congratulate our country and the citizens for remaining peaceful throughout election time, and also for bearing in mind what unites our country. We are together, we are one nation, we will live together. It has given us a good example of taking care of each other and being your brother's keeper. His Excellency has assured us that in his administration will be open, transparent, and will rely on oversight. Madam Speaker, giving assurance to Kenyans that he will his administration will be open enough and transparent, whereby we know our past experience. This will give every Kenyan the confidence to give their best to the nation. We know that Kenyans are very hardworking people, and everything depends on the leader. By the fact that he has given us the assurance, I'm sure this will encourage the 30 million, the 40 million Kenyans who are working hard every day to feed their families, to even go extra mile so that our country can be one of the best. He also, in his speech, touched on the idea of CS to explain policy and answer questions on the floor of the House to enhance accountability. This is one of the best things that can happen, and it gives us good working relationship. Accountability is one thing that has been missing in our country, and by doing this, we'll be able to feed the country well with information, as information is power. Every citizen will be following what is happening, and as questions will be answered on this floor, in this floor, members will know that the members of the parliament are doing their work, and the cabinet secretaries are also doing their work. With that good representation, then we are only assured of good progress. Madam Speaker, the President also spoke about affordable credit, which makes a huge difference in the rate of business growth. Access to affordable credit is what Kenyans need today. Families have lost their businesses since COVID-19 came. Families have lost their businesses because of poor economy. Families have faced financial challenges and constraints. Many have committed suicide. Many people are depressed. People have developed terminal illnesses, and they are not able to sustain their families. This has affected Kenyans in a very negative way. The speech gave a lot of hope, and especially the idea of affordable credit makes a huge difference, as he says, and Kenyans will be revived. People will be able to revive their businesses. People will be able to enhance their businesses and start their businesses and move on. Madam Speaker, there is no better gift to our citizen than this. In addition to that, he mentioned about the 50 billion Hustler Fund per year. This is a big relief. As we know, poverty is one thing that has affected our country for many years. By doing this,
Honorable Member for Sabatia constituency. Honorable Member, oh, he's there, okay.
Thank you, Madam.
Member for Sabatia, I think you better go to the back. There seems to be a mic working.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity that you've granted me to address this House for the first time. And before I say a few words, I want to thank the President of the Republic of Kenya and his deputy for being elected in those offices. I also want to thank the Speaker, the Honorable Moses Wetangula, and you, Madam Speaker, Madam Boss Sholei, for being elected by this House as the Speaker, the Deputy Speaker. I also want to thank the Honorable Musalia Mudavadi, the Chief Cabinet Secretary of the Republic of Kenya, who happens to be a resident of Sabatia constituency where I represent. He assisted me so much, and I must say thank you to him for the support that he gave me throughout the campaign period. I also want to thank Sabatia people for the opportunity that they have given me to serve them as their area MP for the next 5 years. We have 6 wards in Sabatia, which I would like to name with speed. Liaduyo Izava Ward, where I come from, Chavakali Ward, Sabatia West Ward, Busali Ward, Wodanga Ward, North Maragoli Ward. Those are 6 wards. The people from these wards overwhelmingly supported me, and they voted me in as their MP with the highest number of votes, and I would like to thank them so much. I also want to thank my woman rep, Madam Beatrice Sadagala, and the outgoing MP, the MP who was there before me, Alfred Agoi, for the support they accorded me. I must thank them. I also want to thank my opponents, whom we battled so much. They gave me the experience that I required to emerge the winner, and I also must thank them because they were worthy opponents, and I must thank them for being there to help me get to where I am. The people of Sabatia have a lot of problems, and just to name but a few, we have youth unemployment, which is hitting hard in that constituency, and I must say we must do something to ensure that we are rectifying the situation. We have poor road networks, which is also making connectivity in the villages and to the nearby constituencies a very big problem. So we will be seeking to push this agenda through this House to ensure that we have good roads through the CDF that we are hoping will be reinstated very soon. We have bursary issue, where in the past we have been seeing discrimination in the issue of bursaries, and we are seeking to ensure that once CDF is reinstated, we will do equitable sharing of the bursaries based on the need basis. We also have the housing problem in Sabatia, where many people are living in abject poverty that they cannot put up homes for themselves. We have leaking roofs, which in the past we have tried to work on a few, and we are seeking to continue doing the same through the programs that we are going to set in the nearby future. Touching on the President's speech, I singled out one element to do with the Hustlers Fund. The President said, I'm urging the people and especially the youth in Sabatia to tap into this by going for ICT training so that they can be part of the Hustler Fund distribution, which I'm very sure is going to work well for them. I also want to commend the President for proposing transformation of KRA from Kenya Revenue Authority to Kenya Revenue Service in a bid to make it a people's friendly. One thing is that when we are paid, especially for those people who are earning salary, a big percentage of that money goes to Kenya Revenue Service. Is supposed to make KRA a friendly partner to the people who are paying taxes through the same organization. Far from that, security has been a problem in our home constituency of Sabatia, where there are so many cases of rising cases of insecurity, and this, the security organization in Sabatia, our police stations are understaffed. So we'll be seeking maybe through this House, when the standing orders are amended to allow cabinet secretaries appear before Parliament to answer to questions, we will be putting questions to the cabinet secretary in charge of internal security to ensure that our police stations within and across Sabatia constituency are well equipped and well staffed to ensure that we are increasing the security situation in our constituency. Far from that, the President also touched on subsidizing fertilizer and bringing the prices down to 3,500 shillings. I want to report through this House to the people of Sabatia that our fertilizer was received at the Chavakali NCPB depot, and the farmers should be ready to purchase the same fertilizer at that rate through that depot. I want to thank the President so much for the second time for having stood with some of us to ensure that we are making it to this House. Lastly, it was supposed to be the first, but I thought it should come last. I want to thank God Almighty who made all of us come to this House, and I'll seek all MPs who have been elected for the first time and those who are in, let us stand together. Let us ensure that we are working for our people, and I'm very sure my neighbors in Muhaya, Amisi, Vihiga, and Luanda will stand with me as I will stand with them to ensure that we are addressing the issues surrounding our constituencies in a good way to make our county of Vihiga a better place than we found it. Thank you.
Thank you. Member for Malava, who will be then followed by a member for Migori County.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Before I register my thanks to the President's speech, I would like to congratulate you for being elected as a Deputy Speaker and Moses Masika Wetangula as Speaker of this House. Madam Speaker, I also want to thank the people of Malava for electing me the third time as their MP. I think it's because of what I did for them. They have trust in me, and I want to assure them that this time again, I'll serve them so diligently to the levels that will satisfy them as their MP. Madam Speaker, I also want to thank our President, William Samoei Ruto, for being elected as our President, and most importantly, for him proving that he's a honest person, he's a trustful person, because as I speak, I'm speaking from the position of ANC, who joined hands with him, UDA, in Fort Kenya. What he pledged that he would actually grant us, he has lived to this. He has not been so deceitful, and I want to thank Moses Wetangula and Musalia for choosing to work with William Ruto, because even the people of Western are so happy that this time around, for the first time, as we usually vote, it's the first time the Western people have really benefited from the person they have supported, unlike before, where some of them you suffered so much, like Wetangula, I remember in the last parliament, he gave a lot of support to a particular friend, our neighbor. He actually demonized him. We recall what happened in the Senate. We recall also what happened here in the National Assembly. So thank you, Mr. President, for being faithful, for being honest, avoiding politics of deceit. Now to the President's speech. Madam Speaker, some people have been asking, even I've been hearing here, that the President's speech was so brief. But Mr. Speaker, our President seems to be a very brilliant man. We look at his speech of half an hour. Interestingly, it captured the aspirations of most Kenyans. So whoever is imagining that it was so brief, maybe the lengthy bit of it is now what we are trying to air on the floor of the House. What touched me most, Mr. Speaker, was the issue of loans, particularly to small-scale persons, the so-called hustlers. Mr. Speaker, I have a case, particularly for us, persons of Western. Most of the persons in Western have a phobia for loans. This is from the history the people experienced with the AFC loans. In the 1970s and 1980s, our people used to get loans from AFC, but most of them, these loans did not help them. Instead, when it came to repayment, because of the high interests, because when the loans came about, most of our people went for it, And what they were giving us surety was land. And most of them, because of the high interest rates, were defaulting, and most of our people lost land to AFC, to the government. So these loans have been so difficult for them to go for. When they had begun opening to the loans, Madam Speaker, unfortunately, the institutions that were giving these particular loans were also now asking for very high interest rates. So again, these people had developed some fear for the loans. But I'm very happy for the President to have actually talked about ensuring that our hustlers get money at lower interest rates. This will really boost the economy, because we know most of us are where we are because of actually accessing loans affordably. Mr. Speaker, even as our hustlers get this money, I would urge that the law, we design the law such that it does not actually, these interest rates do not change along the way. Because what happens, again, sometimes when you're collecting this money as a loan, along the way it changes. Banks are really fond of this, that you take a loan which tells you the interest rate is 13 per annum, but along the way it also changes, so it makes it so difficult for the hustlers to operate. Madam Speaker, we also know that when it comes to these small-scale persons, they pay taxes. You realize that currently we have so many taxes. We have taxes from the national government, we have taxes from the county governments. So, Mr. Speaker, I would that as we develop this, we also take care of the numerous taxes that are actually affecting the small-scale persons who will really go for these particular loans. And I want to thank the President because of his commitment to the hustlers, the so-called Fuliza, for which has been hurting our people most. Some action has already been taken. I'm also seeing some action is being taken by the Cooperative Bank of Kenya, lowering some interests and appealing to persons to go for their loans at affordable rates. Mr. Speaker, or Madam Speaker, sorry. The other thing that also took me with a lot of interest is the NHIF, Madam Speaker. When you look at NHIF, the way it operates, most of the people who are really paying a lot of money, we are earning over $1 million. And what we are paying for over $1 million, what we are paying for NHIF is 1,700 every month. But the hustler is required to pay 500 shillings every month. When you look at the rate the hustler is paying, which is 500 shillings, you compare with what I'm paying, which is 1,700, it's actually the hustler who is paying a lot of money. Madam Speaker, this is a step in the right direction where we actually contribute to this depending on how much we are earning, so that the rich, the well-up persons like ourselves can contribute more so as to carry these people who are really even relying on us to help them in terms of medication, to help us in so many things to do with their health. But Madam Speaker, something that I might also want this NHIF to do is currently what happened with the usual hustlers. They are restricted to only one medical facility. For example, me, I have employees whose families are in the rural and themselves work here. But Madam Speaker, they are restricted to only one facility. So now the question is, when the one I'm working with falls sick, you know, he has now to travel all the way to up country. And interestingly, now NHIF is, for example, looks like it's for the well-up persons who have a lot of influence. When us fall sick, we go to any hospital as listed by our insurance companies. The NHIF normally follows us there to take care of our medical expenses. But how come when it comes to the common mwananchi, they are restricting them to a particular facility, which is only one, instead of having several of them, because this is what it is. It's a national, we're talking of universal health care to all Kenyans. If we restrict them to one facility, then we're also being restrictive to these particular persons. Madam Speaker, what is also of interest is the Hustler Fund. And I would argue that probably we have come to a stage where we have to harmonize these funds. You know, Weso Fund, Youth Enterprise Fund, all those that they come into one fund that can be useful to our people. Madam Speaker, our experience, or my experience, when it comes to group workings, it varies from one community to another community. I've realized that when it comes to Weso Fund, which goes to groups, the issue of formation of groups is a challenge somehow to most of our youth, to most of our women. I would argue that when it comes to the Hustle Fund, and together they merge with Weso Fund, we individualize these funds so that we are talking of individuals who take these funds and they become responsible by themselves. Finally, Madam Speaker, I want to applaud the President for choosing most of the cabinet from here. The last government collapsed because of the so-called technocrats, CSS, who did not have the feel of the people who put them into government. They were so rigid in terms of their operations, but I want to thank the President for choosing persons who have tested politics, who know what politics is all about, persons who will open their doors to the sitting MPs to access them for the sake of the persons who have actually sent them to Parliament. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I register my thanks to the President's speech.
Thank you, Member for Malava. We now go to Member for Imwar Dikir, Honorable Johanna Ngeno.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for also getting this opportunity and to make a contribution towards the presidential speech. And first, before I make my contribution, Madam Speaker, I wish to congratulate the President of the Republic of Kenya and his deputy for that election. I also wish to congratulate the Speaker and you yourself, Madam Speaker, for winning also the election in this House. I know the Senator, the Speaker, the current Speaker, was also the Senator of Bungoma. And I also wish to congratulate him for winning that particular seat also in that particular area. Madam Speaker, I also wish to thank the people of Murwadikir for finding it also good and useful to elect me back to this House for the third time, and also giving me an opportunity to serve in a new government. Remember, Madam Speaker, this is a new government, and serving in a new government is a very important opportunity where when the government is forming new issues and also partaking the matters of the country, it's also very important. Madam Speaker, I wish to also say that the speech of the President was a very important turning point in our country, Madam Speaker, and I think that is actually what I'm going to tack on. I used to state clearly that I support the speech of the President, which dealt with so many things, Madam Speaker. Number one of the issues which the President raised in this House is the fact that the intense election which we undertook on 9th, Madam Speaker, had so many bruises in this country, and it was very intense competition, and there were a lot of issues which were being undertaken. And Madam Speaker, I used to say that the President mentioned that the country needs to come back now together and work together and move forward. Madam Speaker, the President dealt with the issue of the plan which he has for the country. The President mentioned especially the issue of the housing that he wants to bring as a very fundamental issue in his government. Madam Speaker, remember our country, most of the people in this country live on temporary housings. Most of the people in the country live on slums. And Madam Speaker, I think it is a very important issue for the President to have put it as one of his undertakings to ensure that people live on good houses, and houses also which can be affordable. Madam Speaker, we pay rents. Several employees in this country, Madam Speaker, pay rents. Rents which, if it was to be accumulated, Madam Speaker, it would have bought houses at the time those people are employed. Madam Speaker, I think it is a very good idea, and I wish to support the President and say, if it was possible, Madam Speaker, to even divert the rents or the house allowances which most of the employees are being paid in this country, Madam Speaker, towards buying these houses. Madam Speaker, I think at the end of retirement of these employees of government, people would have bought houses. Madam Speaker, also the President talked about the food sufficiency. Remember, currently as we speak, Madam Speaker, there are some areas which are ravaged by famine, droughts, and all those, Madam Speaker. And I'm happy the President looked at the question of subsidizing fertilizer, the production, not even the end. Madam Speaker, even on the fuel issue, the President was also proper in stating that he wanted to remove the subsidies of the end products so that we can, if we were to subsidize, we subsidize the production. And that will actually, in the end, bring down the price of those foodstuffs that we are using. Madam Speaker, the President also talked about the 50 billion money that is to go to to his agenda of the Hustler Fund. Madam Speaker, this was his very major campaign tool while he was going around the country. And Madam Speaker, I believe these 50 billion, Madam Speaker, will go down in a big way to assist the hustlers who are down there, the women, the men, the youth, who will be accessing this particular fund, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the President also talked about the management of public resources. And I think, Madam Speaker, for a long time, our country has been losing a lot of funds, a lot of money, which are allocated to different ministries, Madam Speaker, because of wastages and because of mismanagement. And I think mismanagement and wastage is bigger than even corruption, Madam Speaker. So if the President was to put more scrutiny on the question of management of resources and management of, and actually the question of wastages, Madam Speaker, the country can come back to its vibrancy. Madam Speaker, I think also the President addressed the question of corruption. And by putting resources on the judiciary, Madam Speaker, I believe if judiciary is empowered and given its autonomy, Madam Speaker, they can deal with the corruption cases firmly and in a very fast way. Madam Speaker, remember, the arms of government that are meant to deal with corruption are the DCI, the EACC, and the courts. So, Madam Speaker, if these autonomous bodies are given proper funding by the government, Madam Speaker, then I believe that corruption will go down in this country. It is actually not the executive that deals with corruption. It is not even this parliament that deals with corruption, Madam Speaker. It is the DCI, the EACC, and the cases that ends up in the courts. Madam Speaker, if we allow the courts to do their work properly without twisting, without intimidation, Madam Speaker, I believe corruption will come down in this country. Madam Speaker, the President also talked about the debts, which has actually put this country down. As we speak, Madam Speaker, we are told of trillions of money which this country is paying every year. Actually, we are talking about doing a budget of collecting around 2 trillion in this country in the form of taxes, and we are paying around 1.5 trillion to the debts that the country has incurred, remaining with only around 600 or around 500 billion, Madam Speaker, which is not even enough for recurrent expenditure. That means, Madam Speaker, we are even borrowing to pay the recurrent expenditure, an undertaking, Madam Speaker, which is very wrong. So I believe the statements the President made about the debts incurred by the country is very correct, and we wish to support him in that undertaking, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the President also talked about the health, and I believe, Madam Speaker, that although the health, part of health has been devolved, Madam Speaker, we still believe, just like one member was stating here also, that health should not have been devolved, or if health was devolved, then parts of health should have remained with the national government so that it has proper management. Madam Speaker, remember, many people are admitted at hospitals, and these people don't even pay, or they cannot manage to pay the bills in those particular hospitals. Madam Speaker, the President talked about enhancing the NHIF so that it can easily pay for the people who are taken to hospital. Madam Speaker, there are so many people who are selling parcels of lands. People who are selling almost their fortunes because of hospital bills. And I believe if proper enhancement is made on the NHIF, Madam Speaker, then obviously these people will not be incurring those much losses. Madam Speaker, the President also talked about the Equalization Fund and the CDF. Madam Speaker, Equalization Fund has been in this House. It has been in the budgets. It is in the Constitution, but no particular, there was only one disbursement which was done by the government. And I believe this government will put more effort to ensure that those areas which had been marginalized for long will also benefit from the Equalization Fund. Madam Speaker, the question of CDF, Madam Speaker, as had been stated majorly by most of the members, is that we need to align it with the Constitution so that the CDF can continue helping the people in our areas. Madam Speaker, remember now schools have been opened and parents are complaining of the fees because there is no CDF at the moment, no dispersal of CDF. So, Madam Speaker, I wish to support the speech by the President, and also I wish to congratulate members who have been appointed to the CSS positions, and we are waiting to pass them here, scrutinize and pass them here. Madam Speaker, I thank you.
Thank you. Next is member for Game. But before even he starts, I just want to assure members that we are doing well and we'll have sufficient time even in the afternoon for those who don't get time now. So we appreciate your interest. And we do still have at least 6 or 7 members who can go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Allow me to congratulate you for your election and that of Honorable Wetangula. Having said that, allow me to thank the people of Game for having given me a second chance and for having voted with confidence and acknowledged the developments that I've done for them during the past 5 years. I think from the onset, the President mentioned that the elections that are conducted were very competitive. I think he took cognizance that even the difference in his victory was just 200,000. And therefore, he's cognizant that this country was divided into two. And I believe, given the tone of his reduction of 300 billion, our technocrats at the Treasury to reduce the 300 billion would be look at the last 5-year absorption rates in all the ministries. If we look at the percent to the farmers, we had fewer that the farmers are done better. We'll have a problem in recovering